to have revenge. We feel our need to avenge, to make right, to heal by settling a score. Healing cannot be done by settling a score. The way to be is to remember your connections. We've learned in this class of pre-Columbian contact among people of the four directions. There's a movie out about Lincoln, which I'm not recommending that you see because I haven't seen it yet, but I have my suspicions based on other histories that Steven Spielberg has done. Great movie maker. Some of the pieces do not contain all the stuff that you learned here. So when we talk about radical Republicans, so Thaddeus Stevens from Pennsylvania in the House and Charles Sumner of Massachusetts as a senator, what is the answer to white supremacy? They actually posed the answer to slavery. So the first use of the term radical in American politics was these guys. And I'll show you what their idea was, what made them radical. They proposed, in short, the only way to end slavery, well, to deal with slavery, is to free the slaves and make them fully American citizens, equal to whites. That was radical in the 1850s to 65. And one of the barriers, not the record company A&M, but the twin concepts of amalgamation and miscegenation. Now, the idea of what an amalgam is just like in dentistry when you have these fillings that are silver or gold or whatever. An amalgam is a combination of one or more metals. Right? So, for example, I have a gold tooth, which is 10-karat gold, which means it has stronger metals in it than the 14-karat gold. So 14-karat gold is what they use to make weapons from. 10-karat gold is even stronger than that because it's your teeth. Right? So an amalgam is mixing. So one of the issues that Thaddeus and Sumner are dealing with is the fact that, okay, we need to make these folks American citizens, fully American citizens. And part of that means not only giving them a vote, but also, unlike Jefferson, if there's going to be mixing of the races, that we don't make those folks less human. That it's okay. But the concept of amalgamation, mixing, no, we don't like that. Miscegenation, that's another term essentially for having sex outside of your race. Because this is, remember, in this time, the concept of race not only included skin color, but also where you were from. So in this time, they're even talking about the Irish race or the German race, or remember, because those ethnic Europeans were not considered equal to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So this is like a big leap for them. You know, Ben Franklin himself didn't like the fact that Germans lived in Philadelphia. The reason being, the Hessians, the Germans, were British mercenaries. But some of them stayed because, you know, the British lost and, okay, you don't get on our ships now, you're staying. And so if they stay, what are they going to do? Where are they going to be? Right? So Franklin didn't want them part of being in Philadelphia, right? So, wait, they're both, from our 21st century point of view, well, they're both white people, right? But they weren't considered that. And in this time, they weren't. So, amalgamation and miscegenation, these big issues in terms of our construct of race, which has changed. So, mixing until you can no longer distinguish between the separate elements. And that was part of the fear. That's actually part of the fear today with certain white supremacists. Okay? When Rush Limbaugh says, oh, we're losing our country. Like, okay, look, it's not your country. It's our country. And by the way, if you're worried about being overpopulated by minorities, that has actually been the case for a 250,000 years. So nobody's trying to exterminate you. But this is one of the things that they talk about race mixing to this day, where white supremacists say, you know, we don't believe in mud people. We don't believe in Jews or Sicilians or any of those folks that had mixed with Africans, either by conquest or voluntarily. So this is an issue where there's an elemental belief in racial superiority. So if we looked at the history underlying those beliefs, basically, you know, we have the schizophrenia of Thomas Jefferson, who doesn't marry Sally Heming, who's one of his slaves. Sally Heming is the half-sister of his wife. Right? And they looked a lot like, yeah. His wife's father fathered Sally Hemings. And he inherited Sally Hemings and bought Sally Hemings. And when his wife died, maybe even before, she was his slave. And he fathered several children with her. Took her on trips to Paris. And there was a time there's a book by Barbara Chase Rabaud, if you want to, basically it's a historical novel, but it's fiction. Sally Heming, where there was a time when he brought her to France, to Paris. And in France, slavery was illegal. So she actually had the opportunity to leave him and be free. And she chose not to. Because there was a free society of free blacks there. Right? Dumas, all those folks. Dumas isn't the only... You know, the historical Afro-Europeans that we've been talking about, they're not alone. There's at least hundreds, if not thousands of them in each of their societies. So, Sally Heming could have stayed in France and lived as a free woman. Did not. Came back. So obviously she loved it, clearly, to make that sacrifice. But he did not free his children. His whole piece about slavery. Okay, this is like schizophrenic. No, we can't free them. Wait, your own kids. Wow. Father, one of our founding fathers. Okay, you're going to enshrine slavery. So when we talk about Sally and Tommy, and so when he writes all the stuff that's in the Declaration of Independence, there's that whole piece about, you know, he's writing against George, who is also in love with, and by our American framework, miscegenating with, a black woman of royal birth. And so he's complaining against all the bad stuff that George has done and basically incited us to have slaves, which I have slaves, but I'm putting down the King of England for having slaves. I'm sleeping with a black woman, making kids with her. George III is sleeping with a black woman and making 15 kids with her. It's schizophrenic is the only way I can put it, really. Why do the rules change? So, this is what we're going into when the Civil War is over, we won. Okay, we're going to reconstruct. So the war is over, we won. We's free now. We's American citizens too, but apparently not real Americans or traditional Americans, even though we helped fight in every war that America has ever had to make America. So free to go when, where, when, and how we please or can afford. So when you learn about black history, again, what was done to us because of race is now being done to you because of money. So the chains come off, they create new and different chains. So in no case, in that new freedom, because the basic rule is still racial supremacy. So in no case will white rights be abridged, that is, limited, or white privilege abolished or eliminated, especially even in the cause of justice. So part of the thing that Sumner and Stevens are trying to do is, okay, we want to eliminate white supremacy, here's how we do it, but that's not necessary to be. So I'm going to be curious if I do decide to see the Lincoln movie, whether this is talked about, because it's in the last 4 months of his life, which also theoretically is when Frederick Douglass and all those folks are coming to see him again for the second time, and he tells them again for the second time, you black folks need to go to Costa Rica. So in the Dred Scott decision, Supreme Court Justice Taney said, blacks could not be citizens and the Constitution guarantees the Negro no rights that a white man need respect, unquote. So let's start with the DNA of the Constitution. And definitely, yeah, in the movie, at least in the clips they've shown, the Lincoln movie, no, we can't mess with the Constitution. So, amendments to the Constitution. 13th Amendment, which came directly from the Oregon statutes. Okay, the meme is this. Remember, we get rid of the whipping clause, okay? You're black in Oregon, even if you're an American citizen, it's illegal for you to be here. We're going to whip you. You have 2 to 3 years to leave. If you don't leave, we'll whip you, and we'll whip you every 6 months until you do leave. That was passed in 1844. In June, in Christmas time, they said, okay, we're not going to whip you, but now you will be subject to arrest if you're still in Oregon. Even if you're an American citizen, if you're black, it's illegal for you to be here. So we won't whip you. What we will do is, you're a criminal now. And so we will arrest you, sell you to the lowest bidder, because slavery is about the highest bidder, and then they have to work you, and then you have to use your wages to pay off their bond debt, and then you can leave. But we're posting $1,000 bond to get you out, and you have to work that off, and you have 3 years to do it at 50 cents a day. So, Amendment 13, January of 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, that is, being forced to work for somebody, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to its jurisdiction. Okay? So, yes, slavery's over, but if you commit a crime, and crime is going to be not determined federally, but by the states. Okay? So, we're in the process of winning the Civil War, right? So, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges of or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. This is the Constitution. So this is the idea. You're born here, you're a citizen. End of discussion. So the idea was, okay, slaves who were born here are citizens, no matter what their grandparents did. Oh, well, but actually in the South, they actually came up with these things called, you've heard the phrase grandfathered in? Okay? So in the southern states, if your grandfather could vote, you could vote. Wait. The amendment says, if I'm here, I'm a citizen, and I can vote. No, because it's the states that determine who's eligible to vote. That's why there's differential. If you're a felon, you can vote in Oregon, but you can't vote in Texas or something like that, because the states determine who's eligible. So, grandfather clause. When they say something's grandfathered in. Okay? Where basically, if your grandfather could vote, you can vote. Of course, slaves, grandfathers couldn't vote. So that was a way of denying them the vote, even though the Constitution said you can vote. You're here. Even if you were born here. This is the amendment that that SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, used to hand Bush the election in 2000. Because Florida voters were subject to the Equal Protection Clause.
Can you elaborate on that more, please?
I can. How do we count votes?
Like you count, like
How do you count votes?
by number of votes?
Number of votes, and how does that happen?
People vote.
People count them on ballots.
Okay, so did y'all vote
Yeah.
in Oregon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we did vote by mail, though we used to do, I don't know, were you old enough to remember when we voted in polling places? Okay.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I voted.
Yeah, you've seen it
Never
in
did it.
museums, but you didn't do it. Okay, so I'm old enough to remember when we voted in Oregon using polling places, and it was actually kind of fun, because you have these little old ladies, you know, Mr. Harris has voted. And you basically had these computer punch cards that you pushed out all the way, right, completely, right? And you turned those in, the computer read them, counted the vote, and boom, there we go, right? And you put it in a sealed envelope and you hand it to them. Now we went to voter by mail because it was cheaper. And so then you have these things where you color in the little oval, or you used to connect an arrow, right? Now you color in an oval for who you're voting for, or you write in, you know, for judges, we did that too. Or you could write in another name if you notice that on the ballot, right? And that again is also fed into machine and or read by hand. In Florida, they had the old system of punching through, so sometimes it didn't punch through all the way, so the little part that you punch out called a chad was hanging. So is this a vote or is it not? They didn't know, right? So, and again, what happened with this election is Florida was the last place to count because of this issue of hanging chads. So that was one part. There was another part where within Florida, the old ways of suppressing the vote among black people were used, where they would change the actual physical polling place. Or they would put a police cordon around it. Or they would like check your ID. Or any of those combinations. Who are you voting for? You know, I mean, Fox News, they were talking about, oh, the new Black Panther Party was, you know, one guy, that's suppressing voters. Like, okay, like white folks are afraid to go by the new Black Panther, you know, like that's gonna happen? Or whatever. Anyway, the issue was equal protection of the law. And the law says, you're a qualified voter, you can vote. So that's why they had to do the recount, because we will not deny the people of Florida the right to vote. They have the equal protection. So basically when they ordered the recount and qualified or disqualified sections of the vote, and they decide, okay, who has won the popular vote in terms of the election? So they allow or disallow folks, and boom, they decided, oh, Bush won the election. So there was this whole screaming about, okay, well, Gore won the popular vote. So how do you award the state to Bush if he won the popular vote in Florida? Was their vote suppressed for it? there was that issue where their votes were that close, in which they basically had a recount. And we talk about this in third term more in detail, but essentially that's what it is. The Supreme Court is the arbiter to decide what the election results are, if it's that close. So it's never been that close since then. But the Republicans were basically saying, oh, well, there was voter suppression of the white vote, the new Black Panther Party, or it wasn't really that close at all, not even. 14th Amendment continued. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. So, anyone born on American soil is an American. So, as an example, Barack was born in Hawaii, automatically an American citizen. Doesn't matter that he lived all over, it's where you were born. You're born on American soil, you're a citizen. End of discussion. Now, the problem is when we have the quote-unquote illegal aliens, which is like, okay, so some brown people that you don't like are illegal aliens, but Russians or other folks, Canadians, who are also illegal aliens, escaped. Actually I remember being in the airport at Legal Seafood in D.C., in Washington National. And there was the primary, so Hillary was running against Barack, among others, right? So this woman that I was sitting next to at the bar, waiting for a table, she said, I'm for Hillary, who are you for, assuming I'm black man, I'm for Barack. Okay, yeah, sure. And what about this question about illegal immigration? She said, yeah, I work in a law firm and we have an illegal immigrant working for us. I go, what do you mean illegal? Well, Canadian. As a law clerk. It's a joke inside our law firm. Oh, so how much does this illegal alien make? Well, law clerk, right? 60 grand. Yeah, so the Canadians ain't washing dishes. So when we talk about people taking American jobs, are these jobs that you are actually doing? Because the Canadian, Jay Leno actually made this a bit, right? It's like, there's like more than several million illegal aliens and ICE ain't going after them. And they're doing jobs that Americans could do and it's not farm work. So how come, the million or so white illegal aliens are not pursued, but the brown ones are? And then you have this issue, Ben, of the kids who are born on American soil are citizens, but their parents are deported if they're found. So really? Who's going to raise the 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever? And then you also have the piece of the DREAM Act, where you have kids who basically came here as infants illegally, but all they've ever known is America. Can't go to college because something my parents did. I can fight for my country, but I can't vote. So the idea of the border, that didn't really exist before the United States. So just so you know, on the midterm, right? Mexico freed the slaves first and elected a black president first. Mexico, not America, Mexico. So the issue of that piece about any child of illegal immigrants born on U.S. soil is a citizen. So Native America, we didn't believe in illegal immigrants. Unless you're talking about people by being here breaking certain laws, like the Pilgrims raiding graves. That usually is my standard answer, yeah. If you're referring to the Mayflower, yeah, I will agree with you. But as far as the people you're talking about, illegal immigrants, these people were welcome here before you even had an alphabet. So what gives you the right to say there's a border? We didn't create the border. You created the border. And the border doesn't seem to apply to white folks. So what's up with that? How about we have a conversation about immigration policy devoid of race? Can we do that? So, the fight, for example, over Elian Gonzalez. Do you remember Elian Gonzalez? Okay. So, the law can be ignored for a time for political purpose, the feet wet policy. So, maybe you didn't know. The reason I'm talking about taking race outside of our immigration policy is because of examples like Elian Gonzalez. So, since Fidel Castro took over Cuba, people have been migrating from Cuba to Florida. And the official policy of the United States in terms of those things, since we don't like communist Cuba, that they're escaping to freedom and we're going to support that. Right? So anybody who's a Cuban citizen who makes it to shore, the Coast Guard can intercept them on the high seas and turn them back. But if they make it to shore, feet wet, they get to stay. They're technically illegal immigrants, right? Because they're not going through an embassy. So they're Cubans, escaping communist regime. They're illegal immigrants. They get to stay if they make it to the beach. Except there's a caveat there. If they are what the Cubans themselves say, you recognize that gesture, huh? Yeah. Okay? You're too dark. Okay? So remember, in Latin America, so-called Latin America, there are 130 million black people. There are more black people in Latin America than there are in America. Close to half of Cubans are dark-skinned. Okay? So if a Cuban that's dark-skinned makes it to the United States, the feet wet policy doesn't apply to them. They're treated as if they're Haitians and sent back, even though they're Cuban. So wait, a racial policy? Yeah. Not all Cubans are treated with, or can benefit from the feet wet policy. If you're a light-skinned Cuban, you get to stay. If you're a dark-skinned Cuban, you get sent back. So this was, my proof for this is the now defunct George magazine, which was edited by, and basically the head editor, the owner of the paper, the magazine, George, was John F. Kennedy Jr., and he wrote a story about Elian. So apparently what had happened with Elian, the backstory, was that he, along with his mom and his sister, were on this boat to try and leave for America. So they left at midnight, and there was something wrong with the motor, so they stalled out about a mile offshore. So they made it back to shore the next morning, and Elian's dad took him, said no, took the sister back, said no, this is crazy. You know, I support you going, but no. So they got a new motor and then, sailed off, and the boat sank. So they didn't have, life jackets, they used inner tubes. So Elian's mom